Hi, good afternoon. Thank you for joining us today. Welcome. My name is Howell Williams. I'm the Senior Director of Client Services here at the Learning House, and I'm so pleased you've joined our virtual environment today. There might be some folks that log in late or join us here in a few minutes, so we'll be on the lookout for those that join us as we go. I would like to introduce today's main presenters and discussion leaders to you. First, we have Mr. Michael Tyree. Michael is the Director of Student Success here at the Learning House, and he's led the strategy and operations for our retention services for almost a year. Under Mike's leadership, the retention pilot with Notre Dame College has expanded to multiple online programs. However, the strategy was and continues to be tested and refined through Dr. Carol Ziegler's early involvement and direction with these education programs. So we are so pleased that she was able to join us today as well. Dr. Ziegler currently serves as the Notre Dame College's Chief Mission Officer, as well as the former chair of chair for the Division of Professional Education. Before we begin, I wanted to provide you with a few housekeeping notes. We certainly welcome your questions and comments throughout our session today, our brief session today. You can type a question via the chat feature or raise your hand. Moderator Emily Wheeler has graciously agreed to be assisting us today in this regard, if you see her. All right, let's go over a quick high-level outline of what we hope to cover in the next few minutes. I'll provide you with a quick overview of Learning House's retention services. Next, we'll spend the majority of the time exploring how these services and results manifested in two major programs at Notre Dame College. One, the TEEL program, or it's a TEEL licensure program, and we'll go through acronyms here in a little bit, as well as the RN-BSN online degree program. Finally, we'll wrap it up and see how this information can be applied to your own school and a general question and answer session. Okay, so a quick overview on Learning House. Learning House helps colleges and universities reach their online education goals by creating quality online programs that result in a positive student learning experiences, or at least we hope so. We work with these schools at various experience levels in online education to help them achieve their unique goals, and we provide comprehensive solutions, and our retention service happens to be one of those, really at the bookend of a student experience or degree, online degree program. So our retention services, we are designing and continue to design them to improve the overall learning experience for online students, particularly students like at our partner school, Notre Dame College. Overall, just like anybody in the business of retention, we're helping students and we're helping them achieve their educational goals. And we do this through two major channels or strategy and operations here at the Learning House. One is at the institutional level, largely through retention auditing and consulting, setting goals for graduation rates, leave of absence rates, all the metrics that go into tracking retention. And we develop an action plan around those benchmarks, largely related to student services for the online student. You know, what was their experience with financial aid, advising, course, outcomes, everything that goes into the student experience. Our team continuously evaluates the online programs, and we generate weekly and quarterly reports that spotlight trends using the student-specific data. But today we're going to concentrate even more so on the student-level experience, and that's primarily through our coaches and academic advisors working directly with students. The objective of academic advising and success coaching is to help students set and achieve their goals. Advisors provide individualized guidance, structure, and feedback to students from the enrollment process all the way through graduation. And so they regularly monitor academic success metrics and use relationship building to create the advising relationship with students. Because of this, we're able to quickly identify at-risk students and proactively address retention challenges. And I'll turn the rest of the presentation over to Mike Tyree, who can lead and guide us through the approaches for those two efforts.
Thanks, Al. What I'd like to do is kind of walk through sort of where we started with our approach and how that's evolved over time, talking about some of the benefits of the approach and some of the results that we've seen, in particular at NDC, and also if there are questions about kind of overall trends. So our relationship with the students really began as success coaches, and in that capacity, what we typically do is help the students focus on things that were maybe outside of the classroom in a lot of ways, so helping them develop effective time management skills, helping them set short and long-term goals and checking in with them on a regular basis to make sure that they were achieving them, and if they were not, offering alternative strategies to meet those goals and just general intervention strategies. Some of the benefits of that approach have been fairly well documented in the past couple of years. Students who have received success coaching services tend to exhibit higher persistence and retention rates than those who don't, in particular in an online environment. Again, the focus primarily in those early conversations was on goal setting, and largely the students would also still have an academic advisor at the institution who would focus on a lot of the academic elements of their career at Notre Dame College and at other schools. One of the things that we used to inform our approach was a proactive monitoring of performance through the learning management system. We use Moodle at NDC and at Learning House in general. And so what we would typically do is take a look on a weekly basis and just do a spot check of how students were performing. So were they exhibiting activity levels that were at or above or below those of their classmates? Were they performing at, above, or below course averages? Were they communicating with us on a regular basis? Did they suddenly just kind of drop off the radar in terms of their coursework or in terms of their communication with us or their communication with faculty members? And just doing those check-ins on a very regular basis and seeing if we could address retention issues as early as possible. And if necessary, put the students in contact with resources at their school that could help them out with any issues that they were encountering. What we've done is kind of do the regular check-ins based on a contact strategy, and that contact strategy is based on where we've seen attrition risks and retention trends with the students across the schools that we provide services for. So typically most of the students who drop or who are at risk for dropping are in their first couple of terms at the institution, and so what we'll typically do is check in with those students on a weekly basis. After that, the students are rated in terms of the risk of attrition that we perceive them to have, and that can range anywhere from severely at risk to at risk, borderline at risk, neutral, or distinctive. The students that are severely at risk or at risk, we still contact on at least a weekly basis. Some of the students check in with us a lot more often than that. And the expectation is, especially for those students that are severely at risk, that some sort of synchronous contact will occur every couple of weeks, whether that's a phone call or a video conference, or even sometimes a live chat session. As the students move to sort of higher statuses in terms of their risk of attrition, that contact might happen a little less frequently, so that those students who are distinctive, which are typically students that are performing well in their courses, have clear academic goals, have good time management skills, we're really helping them kind of do their academic planning, but they've really developed a lot of the other skills that we think is necessary for them to be successful. Something that we found that was helpful, though, was taking on some more of the traditional academic advising, or taking on more of a traditional academic advising role as well. I worked as an academic advisor for several years, and one of the approaches that I always found to work really well was the appreciative advising approach. It's kind of rooted in positive psychology, and there's 6 stages there with disarm, discover, dream, design, deliver, and don't settle. Jennifer Bloom has kind of written a text on the approach and offers regular sessions for developing the approach. But essentially, you focus on the students' strengths and help them develop goals, academic and otherwise, that sort of maximize or are consistent with those strengths. And while there may be challenges that you help students with, it's always sort of couched in positive terms. It is very student-centered, and one of the challenges that we sort of had, and I've done this with online students in the past, but it's always interesting kind of incorporating some of the early stages or approaches in the appreciative advising method to online students, because so much of the advice sometimes is on eye contact and active listening, and those are things you might be able to get them if you were doing a video conference with a student, but sometimes it's a little bit more challenging to figure out ways of doing that either through the phone or through email. So we worked on techniques with the success coaches and academic advisors to sort of enhance the relationship building skills that they have with students. So part of that approach was things like keeping track of the information they were getting from students. So if they had a birthday coming up, or they were expecting a child during the term, making notes of those dates, and then maybe sending out just greeting cards or reminders or just congratulations, just so they kind of knew that the academic advisor, success coach, was connecting with them. Also, we worked on some techniques and kind of did some role play with phone conversations, and talked about how we know when someone's paying attention to us on the phone and when they're not. And just working on those techniques with them, and we've had pretty good results in terms of both satisfaction from staff members and satisfaction from students, which I'll walk through kind of towards the end of the presentation. One of the other things that played nicely in terms of adapting some of the appreciative advising techniques with our overall approach was the scaffolding, so that we're, as mentioned earlier, contacting the students and offering a lot of support during the early going, but also teaching them along the way to be self-sufficient, to be planners on their own, because we know that they're going to be graduating and moving into the workforce in their chosen field. So what was nice about using the appreciative advising approach was that we were able to sort of use some of those don't settle and deliver stage techniques with the students and fold those into our contact strategy. So we'll talk a little bit about specifically how things have worked at Notre Dame College with two programs. The first of those is the TEEL program, and I'm going to turn things over to Dr. Ziegler for a bit as she talks to you about how that program's been structured, what the history of the program was like, and some of the challenges that we kind of helped address.
All right. Thank you, Michael. I appreciate the introduction, and welcome to all of you. Let me tell you a little bit about Notre Dame College's TEEL program. So TEEL stands for Teacher Education Evening Licensure. The program is a 15-year-old program here at Notre Dame College. So it was offered on campus, face-to-face, for approximately 8 years before we got into the online market. The program, because it was a teacher education evening licensure program, was always aimed at students who had their bachelor's degree minimally. Later on, when we talk about the student profile, we'll see that students sometimes even have a terminal degree. So in approximately 2007, we migrated this face-to-face program online. It still exists face-to-face here on campus in South Euclid, Ohio. And so we have some students face-to-face, some hybrid, and a good number online, probably about 150 to 180 online at this point. The program structure is such that people do bring in their bachelor's degree, or they might have a master's, or in a few cases, either their law degree or a doctoral degree. So we have people who've been lawyers, artists, successful in the business field, and in other areas. They're often career change. The good thing about this is that I did my PhD work at Boston College on career change adults, so this is a good match for a part of my work here at Notre Dame College. So these people are coming in, and we have 12 licensure programs. So you'd think teacher education evening licensure, that's pretty easy, right? Not. So we have 5 secondary or AYA programs, adult, adolescent, and young adults. So people, meaning the teacher candidates, need their content courses reviewed plus the education courses. Then you have middle childhood education, where students will need minimally 2 content focus points plus their education courses. Then you have early childhood and mild moderate intervention specialist or special education. So with our 12 programs, there's a lot of transcript review that needs to be done at the front end here at the college and or with the Learning House staff. I think we've been very successful in doing that work. A lot of it revolves around having some kind of seamless communication system. So entry is important, advising with an appropriate course sequence pointed out ahead of time, tracking any other coursework that needs to be done, especially in terms of the content courses, and getting those transcripts back to Notre Dame College so that our certification officer can sign off on the license when we get to that point. So in terms of the program structure, it's admittance, a series of online courses where, depending on whether those courses, at this point, we have particular nights targeted to the teacher education evening licensure group. We have Tuesday and Thursday nights targeted courses so that if they want to come on campus, they can take those classes on Monday, Wednesday, if they would like, or earlier on Tuesday or Thursday. That's part of the program structure. Additionally, we have elements that we've explained to TK20 in terms of progress towards licensing and practice exams. So a lot of the advising integrates elements of required courses, field experiences in education and clinical at the end, and the responsibilities related to licensure tests and then applying for license. So that whole structure keeps being refined as we interact with the Learning House. And I have to say that Amy Hancock, who's one of their key advisors, has done a very nice job in helping us make this a seamless process with the students, because as you might imagine, having, 185 active students with potential 250 who are inactive, I think Michael will talk a little bit about that. When people take leaves of absence, either because adoption, new baby in the house, some illness with a parent, so all kinds of issues crop up, and then people take a leave, and then integrating their re-entry is critical. So we have students from 22 years of age just out of our own undergraduate program at Notre Dame or some other local college, all the way up to 60 years of age. So it's just fascinating to see who comes into the program, what their desires are, and what they bring. I find adult students very vibrant. So I think those are some of the key elements. In terms of working with students who are changing careers, I think the appreciative advising is really important for them. You want to confirm the gifts that they bring. You want to help them see this is doable. The way we have set up our terms with Learning House, right now we're in the spring semester, and so for students who are really on a quick pace, they could take 2 courses, one on a Tuesday night, one on a Thursday night in an 8-week session, and then take another 2 courses the next 8 weeks of the spring term, one on a Tuesday and one on a Thursday. And so within actually a full academic year and a half, they could finish most coursework and do student teaching. So part of it, again, is providing them with clear guidance. Here at our end at Notre Dame College, we want to make sure that we have access courses for them so that they can keep the pace that they want. At the same time, we want to alert them to the fact that if they do drop out for a semester or two, they may be off cycle, and we can't guarantee that a course is going to be delivered the minute they want it. So that's always important. I think one key element to keep in mind that you and your institutions will need to figure out is I'm always very clear with our Learning House advisors, and even with the students myself. I'm their major contact here at Notre Dame College. I know nothing about financial aid. So as you might know, those are very tricky regulations, and so typically we keep that fairly clean so that the financial aid advising happens where that needs to at the institution, and all the federal regulations are taken care of in the student advising, the support for the students, and moving them towards their career goals are the major responsibilities that we assume with the Learning House. Students often complete content courses elsewhere. So an artist may come in who's lacking one or two courses that we require. So we work with them locally here. We have Lakeland, a community college, Tri-C, Cleveland State, and even a few private colleges nearby, as well as Kent State or Akron. Sometimes there's an online English course that they might take from the University of Phoenix. So some of our Spanish adolescent, young adult, evening licensure teacher candidates might take a CLEP exam that counts for a particular course. So again, we work very closely with the Learning House advisors to make sure that together we're giving the students the exact same message. And I think that is one of the lessons learned that we can help Learning House communicate effectively to you. Because if there's anything we always want is a consistent and single message given to the students regarding any advising or next steps for them. So, Mike, I think that's it, unless you or anyone else wants me to clarify anything.
Thanks, Dr. Ziegler. I'd like to talk a little bit about some of the retention tactics that we've engaged in with the TEEL students. We do our outreach, again, according to the contact strategy that I outlined earlier that's based on the attrition risks that we see students present. But we also adjust that outreach based on whether or not a student is an attending student during a current term or whether they're a student who is taking a leave of absence. So the attending students, we would typically follow the contact strategy that was outlined earlier in the presentation. But leave of absence students are students who sometimes fall through the cracks. And what we're able to do is continue to reach out to them and continue to maintain their connection to the institution and help facilitate their re-entry whenever they're intending to return.
We have a quick question. Do you let a stopped-out student enroll even though a course isn't available? Do you let a student enroll at any point, or do you make them wait?
I'm not sure if I understand.
That was Timothy's question, so maybe we can unmute him and he can clarify exactly what he means. Hang on one second.
Was the question again?
There you go. Sorry.
Oh, are we good?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, the gentleman just mentioned that, that sometimes if a student stops out for a couple semesters, gets off track, but then wants to re-enroll, they're told that sometimes that course isn't available. But the question is, would they be able then to enroll in a different course at that time, or do they need to wait until the next enrollment cycle comes around, or we're just curious how they handle that process of re-enrollment.
Sure, and part of that will depend on how long the students have been out. If they've been out long enough that they need to be readmitted to the institution, then they would have to follow that process. If they've only stopped out, as Dr. Ziegler had mentioned, often there will be maybe 2 blocks within a term. So within the spring term, a student might sit out for the first block of courses, and they'd be able to re-enter during that second block.
So if they were to be readmitted, then they need to wait till the next student enrollment period is available, is what you're saying, basically.
Right, if they had to be completely readmitted.
Okay, that's perfect. Thank you. That helps clarify.
So that's one of the tactics, is to continue reaching out to those students who are sitting out or taking a leave of absence during the current term and facilitating their reentry. Another one is to engage in regular check-ins with institutional points of contact. And part of the importance of this was something that Dr. Ziegler had mentioned, is that we maintain consistency in message across anyone who the student might contact, whether they're there at Notre Dame College or here at the Learning House. So what we'll typically do is hold these regular retention checks at least every couple of weeks, and it might be more if some needs arise to do that. But we would, at that point, maybe escalate some issues that we think needs the attention of someone at Notre Dame College, or get clarity on some student questions or some processes. This also offers us the opportunity to address some of the institutional areas that Dr. Williams had mentioned at the beginning of the presentation. So if we see that maybe something procedural or something related to a process is going on that might be impacting students' abilities to register, or that a course needs to be available in a particular term, or maybe we notice that students, while they may be receiving certain information during the enrollment process, by the time they get a year in, a year and a half in, some of that information they may have forgotten it, and so we just want to have processes and procedures in place to offer them reminders of things that might come up that we need to address as early as possible. So we'll talk about some of the results that we've seen with the TEEL students. What I did was take a look at a couple of snapshots. So we had first taken on the advising and success coaching responsibilities with the TEEL students in October of 2011. So then we did another snapshot in October of 2012, just to kind of see where that initial population of students was. This population was around 380 students, and so what we had seen at that time was that 40% of them had completed the program, 26% were currently attending, 23% were taking a leave of absence or completing courses elsewhere, and 10% of the students had dropped at that point. One of the things that we wanted to look at a little bit in a little bit more detail was how effective our outreach efforts were in sort of maybe helping those students who were taking a leave of absence re-enter Notre Dame College. So we have some preliminary information about that. The first data point is that if we took a look at all of the students who were once taking a leave of absence but then attending in October, 90% of those had been students who were responsive to the outreach efforts that we engaged in. That didn't necessarily give us a point of comparison. So looking at that in a little more detail, comparing the students who were responsive to outreach efforts to those students who were not, and whether or not they returned, 54% of the students who were once taking a leave of absence were attending or had completed the program in October, compared to only 20% of the students who had been unresponsive who were attending or completed the program. Now, this still leaves the question kind of open, because it could be the case that the students who are more responsive to outreach efforts are also some of the more motivated students. But it was an interesting result to kind of take a look to maybe measure some of the effectiveness of those outreach efforts that we'd engaged in with the leave of absence students. One of the more recent programs that we've begun supporting is the online RN-BSN program at Notre Dame College. This is a program that's fairly typical for an online RN-BSN program, and it's a degree completion program for students who've already earned their RN. For the most part, the students in the program are female. The number right now is about 87.6% of those students who were attending between August and December. And for the most part, the students kind of broke evenly between being an Ohio resident and not. There were 47.3% of the students that were Ohio residents of that fall class. Some of the challenges here, the first one, not necessarily too different from some of the challenges that we saw with TEEL, in that the students who are completing the degree are often working students who have long hours and sometimes irregular schedules. A lot of students, for their best time to contact them, they would list 10 o'clock at night, 9 o'clock at night, 7 o'clock in the morning. So that's been one of the challenges. Another has been that the program has expanded pretty rapidly in terms of just the number of students that have come in. So some of the tactics that we have pursued with the RN-BSN students were based on some of the things that we had learned from our interactions and from the support that we offered to the TEEL students. We do still do the outreach based on student type and student type and enrollment status, and regular check-ins with institutional points of contact.
We have a question from Laura asking, how soon after students take a leave of absence do you contact them?
Sure. What we would typically do is move a student to leave of absence if during the schedule adjustment period for a current term or block they don't register for any courses. So that's the first step in that process of when we would move them to leave of absence. We might also move a student to leave of absence if they indicate formally that they intend to take that. And then what we'll do during that first week is just reach out to them and confirm that they don't intend to enroll in any courses that term. And then the next time that we would contact them, unless they express a preference for a different time, would be sort of midway through that block of courses, just to remind them that registration is open for the next term, and see if there are any issues that we can kind of help them with, and see if there's any other challenges that need to be addressed with them.
Usually 2 to 3 weeks later.
Yeah, typically 2 to 3 weeks later. And then we'll also check in towards the end of that period that they're sitting out, again, reminding them about registration and seeing if anything has changed in terms of their circumstances related to the reason that they're taking the leave of absence. The check-ins with the institutional points of contact have often focused on at-risk students in the RN-BSN program. So what we can do there is sort of escalate the students that are most at risk of dropping out for whatever reason, whether or not that's course performance, whether or not it's something that's going on in their lives that's outside of school. Because the division chair in the Department of Nursing likes to reach out to those students as well. And that's been a helpful kind of conversation that we've had back and forth. And so the student feels, I think, supported from, kind of all sides. One of the other challenges that we've had here with rapid program expansion is just course availability based on students' needs. So we also started working on is sort of projecting what we think enrollments might be based on courses that students have transferred with and courses that students have completed during their time at Notre Dame College, to address this leave of absence problem and make sure that it's just not due to courses not being available when students want to take them at the institution.
We have a question from Monica. Have you identified an ideal ratio of student advisors, coaches to students? How many students does each of your advisors support? And do you put more resources behind the at-risk students?
Sure. The ratio that we tend to follow for undergraduate students is 200 to 1, so 200 students to 1 academic advisor. For graduate students, we found that we can bump that number up a little bit. One, because those students tend to be a little bit lower at risk in terms of attrition, and also they tend sometimes not to want to be contacted as much. So that ratio is typically 300 to 1. For both of these programs that we're talking about today, the ratio has been 200 to 1. And in terms of putting more resources behind the at-risk and severely at-risk students, well, we don't necessarily do that in terms of putting more personnel on it. The contact strategy that I outlined earlier would mean that those students that are at-risk and severely at-risk kind of have more attention paid to them by those individual academic advisors, as opposed to those students who are maybe distinctive or were nearing the end of their programs. So the RN-BSN results are very preliminary. This is just based on kind of the first to second term that we've been working with those students. So this would be fall 2012 to spring 2013. So what we saw there was a dropout rate of 15.7%. It's consistent with some of the other rates that we've seen with RN-BSN programs that we've worked with. I know Sue Robertson had identified in an article a couple of years ago some of the challenges of coming up with kind of a benchmark for online RN-BSN retention, and had found rates that varied considerably across programs. We try to benchmark for all of our schools a 75% completion rate, which usually translates into an average dropout rate of 94.4%. Average dropout rate of 5.6% or a retention rate of 94.4% term to term. So we'll see if that kind of levels out a little bit as we continue working with that student population. There have been some leave of absence concerns in that program, and I'll talk in a bit about some of the tactics that we've adapted generally to address leave of absences. And this would probably speak a little bit to the resource question and kind of where we allocate staff time as well. What we're starting to do is weight the students who are taking a leave of absence, who are sitting out based upon their academic performance prior to taking time off or taking time out of the university, and on the relationship building that we've done with those students. So a student who was maybe performing pretty poorly before they took the leave of absence, who'd indicated they had a whole lot of things that were going on that were kind of preventing them from maybe spending a lot of time on their coursework right now, or someone who had communicated with us really well previously but had just kind of dropped off the radar sort of suddenly. Might be someone who's weighted kind of low in terms of their leave of absence because we don't think that they're likely to return to the institution. We think that they're likely to probably turn into attrited students. Students who maybe had been doing really well in terms of their academic performance, who didn't have a history necessarily of taking leave of absences in the past, and it maybe just indicated an issue that had come up during a particular block of courses, might be rated high. And so we would adjust our contact strategies based upon that weight. So those students that we think are very likely to come back, we would reach out to in terms of just helping them get registered for the upcoming term and those kinds of things. And the students that fall towards the middle or towards the low end, we would be a little bit more aggressive with in terms of helping them address maybe the issues that are preventing them from persisting.
We have a question about how you keep advising notes electronically.
Sure. We have a proprietary CRM that we store the information in. And so we usually divide those contacts up into 3 areas. One would be based on email and phone conversations that occur with the students. And so those would just be documenting what happened during those emails and phone conversations. Another area is a school contacts tab, and that's where we would document any kind of communication that came from officials at the school. So maybe if there was some kind of alert or an indication that the student was on probation that came from the school, something like that. And then we also have another tab that's just for quick notes, just kind of indicating what happened whenever an advisor reviewed a student's performance. So these notes would just be something like student is performing at or above course average, tends to communicate well with advisors. So it kind of breaks down into 3 areas, and you can kind of get different snapshots based on each one. I'm not sure if that slide's entirely clear, so I'll walk through some of the information that's on there. At the end of each term, what we do is administer a survey to the students that we're providing services for. And the first question that we ask them is whether or not they would recommend their academic success coach or their academic advisor to other students. And so they're asked to rate their academic advisor on a scale of 1 to 10. At NDC this past fall, the average was a 9.23 on that 10-point scale. One of the other things that we understand is that connectedness to an institution is also often a predictor of whether or not students will persist and how satisfied students are with their experience. So what we started doing is asking a question about how connected students feel to their institution. That wasn't a question that was included on the survey at Notre Dame this past term, but it will be in subsequent terms. So I did share the results that we saw with another partner institution that was of comparable size in terms of the student population to NDC. And we had 81% of the respondents report that they felt very connected or at least connected to their institution. And the top reason that they selected for this feeling of connectedness was their academic advisors, and 90% of the respondents chose that reason, which was actually significantly higher than the number 2 reason, which I kind of thought might be the number 1 reason, which was their faculty interactions, and that came in around 70%. All right. So we will open the floor up to Q&A and talk about any questions or concerns you might have in terms of application of some of the things we've talked about this afternoon.
I know all you shy people have questions, so you can, if you don't want to talk on the phone, you can just send them via the chat, and we'll get them answered for you.
I think someone has a question about the proportion of contacts are by phone versus email. And that depends on how at risk the students are. If the students are highly at risk, then the expectation is that at least 1 out of every 2 contacts will happen by phone. If the students are not at risk, we'll kind of follow more of what their preferences might be. We'll still try to have at least 1 phone conversation with them during the course of a term. And always the first interaction that we try to have with the students is some form of synchronous contact, whether that's video conferencing or a phone call, where we conduct an intake and kind of get an idea of what the students' goals are and just some general background information about the students and why they're completing their degree program. So it's kind of hard to say exactly what the proportion would break down to because it's going to depend on the student type.
We have a question about, can you talk to some of the specific differences between face-to-face and online advising?
Sure. And having done both for a little while, some of the challenges that you have there is that you lose some of the cues that you might be able to communicate in a face-to-face setting versus an online one. But really, it's just a different toolkit. I mean, I think that social media, online dating sites, those kinds of things have demonstrated that you can have pretty deep and meaningful relationships through asynchronous contact and through an online setting. So what we had to do was kind of figure out some ways of adapting the active listening techniques and letting people know that you're paying attention to them to an online setting. And actually, I think it comes in handy because note-taking is so much a part of this and keeping track of what's going on with a student. And if you're in a face-to-face setting, it can be a little bit distracting if you're going to your notepad and keeping track of those kinds of things. Whereas in the online environment, as long as you're not typing too loudly when you're on the phone with someone, they don't necessarily, or you're not asking them to repeat something a lot of times, they don't necessarily know that you're doing that.
We have somebody on the phone who has a question. Go ahead, you are live. Hello?
Hello? Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Sitting and ask your question.
What type of software is used for your video conferencing?
Yeah, we typically use Skype in the past. Did you have a follow-up?
With your adult students, do they respond well to the video conferencing? Do they seem open to using it?
It hasn't quite been as open as I think we expected it to be. Part of that might come down to timing. Again, I talked about the RN-BSN students and the optimal time that they had indicated sometimes that they would be available. We don't have staff that's like 10 o'clock at night and things. But yeah, the response hasn't been as high as we thought it would be with video conferencing. We still offer it as an option, and a couple of students have taken us up on it, so we've gotten introduced to sometimes their pets, gotten tours of their house and those kinds of things. But yeah, the response hasn't been what we expected.
What about your, you mentioned chat as well, like a live chat session. How does that go over?
Yeah, that's actually gone over fairly well. One of the advantages of Moodle and being active within the learning management system is that we can access Moodle chat. So if we notice that a student's online and we need to get in touch with them, we can just drop in and start talking to them. It hasn't been used as much at NDC, but it has been used quite a bit at one of our other partner schools to some success.
We have a couple of other questions. What is the response rate of the follow-up phone calls and emails for the weekly check-ins, and do you have a system to help increase the response rate?
Yeah, this also depends. When we looked at the contact with the TEEL students, about 90% of them were responsive, so we had another 10 that were not over the course of the year. The students who are attending tend to be more responsive than the students that are taking a leave of absence. Some of those leave of absence students just never responded at all during the course of the year. So one of the things that we regularly do is kind of monitor and do audits on the students just to see if they have been responsive. So we'll keep track of if a student is not being responsive for several weeks and start moving them to higher risks of attrition just because they're not being communicative.
We have another question. How did you establish your benchmark retention rates based on your past performance or comparative data? And if the latter, where do you get your comparative data from?
Yeah, what we started doing was taking a look at where we had gone in the past year or how things have been going in the past year and basing off of that. With some of the programs that we work with, there's probably a little bit better retention data than with others in terms of program completion dates and graduation dates. What we find is that a lot of schools don't necessarily separate out online students from on-ground students, and so what they have is just an overall retention number. We also work with a pretty diverse set of students. You know, with some schools we'll have associate's level students, bachelor's level students, and graduate level students, and there might not be a ton within each of those. So it is a little bit of a challenge figuring out what those retention numbers should be set at. So the comparative data that we've really been basing it off of is how we have done in the past and kind of where our partner institutions kind of want to see their graduation rates.
Carrie wants to know if there's a best practices list for student services that are most effective for student retention.
We could write a book.
I can provide like contact information, so if there's like specific resources that you'd like me to kind of point you towards, we can do that. I can't think of like one all-in-one best practices guide for that, and some of it in our case is a little bit of trial and error as well, where we try certain approaches and kind of see if we're getting better response rates, getting better retention rates with particular programs than with other strategies.
Okay, it looks like those are all of our questions. I just want to let everybody know that we have some upcoming webinars. In the beginning of April, we will have a webinar, Improve Online Enrollment by Interpreting Your Conversion Data. We're going to have one about assessing instructor readiness to teach online, and then we're going to have one about student authentication in online learning. And I'd also like to remind everybody that we are hosting our annual conference, Connect, about online education here in Louisville, Kentucky, June 26th to 27th, and we welcome all comers. So thank you so much for joining us, and hopefully we'll see you again at a webinar or at Connect. Thank you.